Hello, I wanted to show how I water my succulents today. First, how to know when to water. I look for signs of puckering or wrinkles in the succulent leaves to signal to me that the plant is thirsty. Then I will water. I can also supplement this information by feeling how heavy the pot is, or sticking my fingers in the soil. The soil should definitely be totally dry before you water a succulent. And then when it's actually time to water, I try and saturate the soil as much as possible through a few different steps. First, just by getting water in the pot, because the plant is super dry and the soil hasn't been watered in weeks and weeks, the water will just run out of the bottom of the pot, which is fine. But if this is all I did, there would actually be very little moisture in the soil imparted from this watering session. So instead, I try to just, again, hit the soil all up at once in the first go around. Let it run through, maybe do this a few times. Then I set that plant aside and I rotate through other plants that I'm watering during this time and come back to that one later. And in the second pass, I will actually be able to water the soil much more thoroughly because the soil will have opened up its capacity, kind of like a sponge. Like a dry sponge isn't going to take up any water, but a wet sponge can get far more saturated. So I'll go through a few of these, and then these other ones are examples that I have already done the first initial watering. Maybe you can see that the soil is wet in there. And now when I come through, water will still trickle at the bottom, but it's not the same whoosh kind of speed of the first watering. In the second watering, you can tell that the soil is saturated and taking up actually a lot of the water that I put in, and whatever can't be absorbed because the soil is fully saturated will be dripped out the bottom. So that's a good signal to me that the soil has really absorbed as much liquid as it can. Then I'll let these just sit in the sink, drip out the bottom, and I kind of keep rotating through the process. By the time I come back to these ones and I need to get these ones out of the way, they'll be dry enough that I can put them back on the shelf. When I'm watering the succulents, I'm not going crazy about it, but I try not to water the actual leaves of the plant because that can leave them open to fungus or damaging their farina or just other issues that you get when you have moist leaves. And again, looking at signs that the plant needs to be watered, wrinkles or general thinness of the leaves, losing leaves from the bottom of the plant. Definitely when you start seeing wrinkles more midway up or even at the top of the plant, that's a very thirsty succulent. I come back around to these first few ones. Let's see how the soil is able to take up water now. And as I'm watering it, because I'm holding it in the sink, I'm also feeling the weight of the pot. So maybe the water dripping isn't a good cue for you, but you're gonna be able to feel how heavy the pot is once it's holding the water. This time when I'm watering is also a great time to check for any pests, note growth, note changes in the plant. Take any cues that you might need for maintenance, such as repotting or dividing. So I hope this is helpful. I get a lot of questions about succulent watering, I think because well, it's easy to overwater succulent, and the newer you are in the plant hobby, the more likely you are to be overwatering your plants. It's just kind of how it works, it seems, which is great because you're really trying to love your plant and give it a lot of attention. But succulents don't really want or need your attention. And I think also a lot of people are looking for advice that's structured in a very prescriptive manner, like water your plants every week, every 10 days. Water succulents in the winter 10 to 14 days. Well, there's just so many factors that go into when a plant will need water. By the way, sometimes I will do this more than once. I might do this 2 or 3 times. The rewater cycle, so I guess a total of 3 plus more times of watering, just to really make sure the soil is going. But at any rate, things that can factor into watering cycle include the maturity of a plant. You know, these little guys here, these little leaf props, they need to be watered more regularly. They don't have a giant water body to pull upon from their leaf stores. So maturity will definitely affect a plant's watering cycle. Time of year, the season, of course, sun exposure, how much sun you're getting in a given day, with south being the most sun, west being second most, east being third most, and north being the least amount of sun. Also, how humid it is in your environment. You can get great little humidity gauges that will tell you the temperature and the humidity of your room, which are both great cues that will lead to all kinds of plant insights, but definitely watering cycle, that's good info to have. And then, of course, the type of plant. I've found that the thinner-leaved succulents need more water than the thicker-leaved succulents, even amongst the same species of plants. For example, this Echeveria Lola needs more water than my Echeveria Laui. It has much thinner leaves, so all those things can lead to making watering a little more complicated if you're looking for a prescriptive approach, like saying water your succulents every 10 to 14 days. I've found the method of observing your plants with the wrinkles, the kind of puckering, generally thirsty look, is a much more nuanced way of watering. You're really trying to water on demand rather than decreeing a ration for them. And for me, that's resulted in a lot less overwatering, which can be really deadly for succulents or cacti like these guys. You know, I haven't watered these in almost 2 months, and you can see, or at least I can see, because this is my plant and I'm familiar with how it looks, this whole girth here is way thinner than it has been, and I can see the ridges and the outline of the plant more. And although it's harder to see with all the spines, this is also true for these little guys. They're looking more elongated and less rotund all around. With this one in particular, it looks almost completely white, whereas when it's filled, I can see more of the flesh and little dots where the spines originate. So you learn this about all of your various specimens. You get intimate and familiar with them, and you'll learn to know what to look for. Looking at this guy is also reminding me that another factor that goes into watering is of course, the type of container that your plant is in, both in terms of whether or not your plant is what's called overplanted, where there's large amounts of soil that aren't filled by roots, or underplanted, where the plant is completely saturated the soil with its own root system and is maybe even poking roots out of the bottom. And also the type of material. So this is a unglazed clay pot, which is very porous and evaporates quickly, well suited for my cacti that need to have a quick draining soil experience. Versus, say, like this plastic pot. Plastic is going to retain the most amount of moisture and be the least porous. with glazed ceramic being kind of in the middle of those two. So those things definitely all factor into watering frequency as well. If you like to have a schedule, if you really wish that the water your plants for every N number of days range worked for you, I would just suggest check in on your plants on that range. So every 1 to 2 weeks in the winter, check in on your succulents and go around and observe all those details, get all the data points, and then make an informed decision about which ones you're going to water, given when you're going to check in on them next. So I hope that's helpful. I have enough plants that this really, the system of rotating really works for me. It's not a problem. If you have fewer plants, I would just sit here and make it a few minute long activity. There's nothing wrong with that. And you'll find, as with any of these things in the gardening world, experience is going to be great for you. The more you do this, the more you're going to learn, the more you're going to observe your own mistakes and how your behavior interacts with the specific plants that you have. And there's really no replacement for that. So don't be hard on yourself and just do your best. If you love your plants, you won't mind looking at them to learn from them. You won't mind spending time with them. If you're finding that you don't want to do all of that effort, then maybe consider owning fewer plants so that it is a joy to look after each one with your full attention. So I hope this is helpful. I can't see the screen where I am now, so I'm gonna poke around in a second and look to see if anyone has any questions, which I will be happy to answer at this time. But I was really just hoping to demystify some of the watering experience, especially for people keeping succulents indoors like me. It doesn't have to be as hard as it might seem, but as with anything, it's a journey that in time you will improve in. Hi. I don't see any questions. Oh yes, the squeeze bottle. This thing is great. I'm sorry mine has algae in it. That's the downside with clear plastic. But these are great. You can get them on Amazon. They have a little straw on the inside, and they really allow you to get in there and not touch the leaves with water, like we talked about. Yeah, so anyways, that's everything I had in mind for this little talk about water. I've got other topics I've been thinking about discussing together, but as always, I appreciate if you guys have any requests or feedback to give me. I'm still very new at video content, so I'm trying to experiment more with that. And I guess just one last note on watering that I'm being reminded by the process. Is this on screen? Yes. So this is just a carbon filter here, drinking water pitcher that my husband and I use for our own drinking water. We replace the filter fairly frequently in our house because this is how I make my plant water, and I make a lot of it. But I bought this on Amazon. It's called a Camelback Relay, and I just like it because it filters water really fast. But I do recommend using filtered water for your plants. It has made a big difference in my plants. You don't really notice, of course, the effects of using tap water if that's all you're using, but once you switch, you may really be surprised at how much better your plants look afterwards, like I was. But essentially the reason why you don't want to use tap water is there are heavy metals like chlorine, for example, in our tap water that are fine for humans to drink, but it's not ideal for houseplants where over time these things can really build up in the soil if you're not replanting really frequently. On this bigger pot, I'm just trying to get in all the corners and saturate all of the soil. There are also two drainage holes at the bottom of this pot, so I'm not scared about overwatering, quote unquote. Overwatering happens from frequency of watering sessions. You cannot overwater within an individual session if your plant is potted correctly. If your plant is overpotted, then that is a risk, but you're going to have other problems in that situation. This can also be a good time to like remove any dead leaves. Unfortunately, this is not a good time, although it is tempting, to take cuttings, voluntary or involuntary, because the plants, the succulents, at least in this case, are very dehydrated. And if I was to take, first of all, even taking like a leaf prop, for example, is really hard right now because the leaves are soft and prone to ripping. And that's one of the ways you can tell that a succulent needs to be watered, is just like the plumpness of the leaves if you can touch them from the other underside. But so it'd be hard to take the leaf prop, and then if you took it, it would be dehydrated as hell, and it would have a really hard time growing roots and a little pup before it died. So the best time to take propagation cuttings from succulents is about, I would really say at least 48 hours, but ideally a few days after you've watered would be the best time, if possible. And I know that I have to water this pot a good few more extra times because it is so root bound. It's really, it's just filled with plants. It hasn't been repotted in a really long time. Here's a different kind of succulent displaying thirst. This is an aloe. These leaves are normally open and plump and like a translucent green almost. Now it is color stressed, which again is desirous in most cases, but we do need to pay attention to that. It's stressed. It's a dark like purple almost. The leaves curl inward. The overall appearance of the plant is smaller and more shrunken, and I'm starting to lose some bottom leaves here. So, and if I look, you know, this plant is super thirsty. This echeveria is super thirsty. The jade plant looks puckered. Now, note the crassula looks fine. These leaves are way more succulent. I would even say this echeveria clara looks pretty good to me here. But when you have a combo pot, you need to kind of look at the total population. And if you're consistently finding that the plants you've potted together are not ready at the same time, you could have some issues from that. So these are just, again, things we want to observe in the watering session. If you find that you do get water in the leaves, especially these rosettes, these dense rosettes, try and get that water out. Because we do not want that sitting, especially in the in-home environment, for what could be literally days. You can blow them out, but you should know that your mouth has bacteria in it. You know, this is like from my nail hobby, but you don't want to be blowing on people with your bacteria-filled mouth. So I do have like a little squeegee thing that that blows out the droplets, but it's not here right now. Welcome to gardening. Where is my stuff? Any other questions before I roll out here and keep watering my plants? I hope this was helpful. I have fun talking to myself in front of you. And like the other videos, I'll make this one available on stories for 24 hours. Thank you. I'm glad, Leslie. Thank you all for joining me. Again, feel free to hit me up in the DMs if you want to request or ask questions or interact in any way. I'll be here home today with my plants doing my plant thing. Until next time.